Hello, this is Hall Martin. I'm the CEO of 10 Capital, where we help startups and investors connect for funding. Today, we're going to talk about knowing your metrics. I want to thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to put those in the chat box or the question box, and we'll answer them at the end of the slide presentation, which will just take a few moments to go through. But appreciate your taking time to joining us today. So raise your hand if you have any questions also, so we know who to go back to as well. So let's talk about knowing your metrics. Investors look specifically for metrics in your business, so it's important to know them when you go out to do fundraising. We focus primarily on fundraising, so we look at these through the lens of how the investor and others are going to view your company, and metrics is a key number that they will always be asking for when you go there. So there are three levels of metrics that you can use. The first is the activity metrics. Activity metrics show the basic activity of the business, how many calls you're making, how many leads you're generating, those type of things. Second is you have what are called unit economic metrics. These unit economic metrics show the unit economic model, including the cost of customer acquisition and revenue. If your company is pre-revenue or has only a little bit of revenue, you can actually show how your business model is working and maybe even profitable by using unit economic numbers, cost per person to acquire, cost per person to close, etc. And third, you have growth metrics. And these are the metrics most investors are looking for. They show the growth in the user base and usage of the product and in revenue and other things that are directly related to growth of the company itself. So it's important to actually bring something to the table. When you go to meet an investor, never show up empty-handed. If you don't have growth metrics, calculate unit economic metrics. And if you can't get unit economic metrics, well, then at least show up with activity metrics and make sure you have something to tell investors when you get there. If the business has seasons or cycles, you can also smooth these out and show them on a 6-month moving average to show your growth rate or show your activity over a period of time. That way it gives a better vision of what you're actually doing. In summary, if you can only show activity metrics, then do so. But whatever you do, don't show up empty-handed. So the thing you might want to focus on is start with your one key metric. Sometimes I find people get overloaded with metrics. They have a giant dashboard and then they give a spreadsheet of this to the investor who gets lost in this spreadsheet. And so I always want to start with one key metric that really says, put your business in a good light and carry it forward. And so here's some examples that we'll go over today. We'll talk about medical devices, consumer packaged goods, e-commerce, software as a service, and mobile apps. And we'll look as an example of one key metric for each of those areas. So if we look at medical devices, oftentimes there's no revenue in medical devices because they require FDA validation. And so what you have to do is prove you have a growth story with something other than revenue. For medical device companies, the key metric is cycle time through the FDA validation process. The purpose of the validation submission is to demonstrate that your medical device is safe and is effective as other medical devices on the marketplace today. The cycle time for approval varies based on the type of device and ranges anywhere from 50 to 300 days. Your key metric compares your performance against the standard cycle time for your type of device. So when you go to the investor, you're basically saying we're on track like every other company. In fact, we're ahead of schedule for getting validation. We have strong approval. We have a strong story with the FDA. They're giving us good signals back. And so this is the growth story you want to tell people. So instead of just saying I don't have revenue, you come in with a metric that shows you know how to execute and perform. In consumer product goods companies, there are many that sell through retail, for example, and the key metric is same-store sales. Show how in one store you continue to grow up every month a higher number of units or a higher dollar value. If there's discounting and other things going on, you want to show it both in dollars and in units. You track sales by units by store for each month. And what you want to do is demonstrate that you're growing month over month. In other words, you have a growth story going there. If selling online, the LTV CAC ratio applies, which is the cost of customer acquisition compared to the lifetime value. And this is the same as you'll find in recurring revenues. We'll talk about in a moment. But either way, these are good numbers to bring to your investors. If you're in the e-commerce world, the key metric is sales conversion rate. Sales conversion rate is percentage of visitors who make a purchase. For most sites, the conversion rate is 1 to 5%. You can find it manually divided by the number of people who bought a product by the total number of visitors. In many sites, there are micro conversions going on throughout the site which lead to a purchase. For example, a user clicking on a product or on a category page is a micro conversion because it takes the customer down the path to a sale. Sometimes these smaller conversions lead to a better understanding of your business than the overall conversion rate and can put your business in a better light. In software as a service and those that use recurring revenue as a model, it's the CAC LTV ratio. CAC stands for cost of customer acquisition and represents the cost of signing up the customer, including marketing, sales, and other related expenses. Lifetime value stands for the total amount of revenue from the customer. This is typically calculated by looking at the churn rate, which is how many customers are dropping out each month, and measuring what might be the lifetime value of the entire population. The metric compares CAC to LTV. A base ratio of 1 to 3 indicates a business model is successful. In this example, if for every $1 spent on acquiring the customer is spending $3 on the service, means you have a decent business. If it's better than 1 to 3, say 1 to 5 or 1 to 8, that's even more compelling to the investor. Many venture-funded companies are going to be looking for 1 to 5 or better. The next one is mobile apps. And the one key metric for mobile app businesses is user engagement with the app. This measures how much time or how often the user engages the app. The user needs to engage on a regular basis and over time increase the usage. Some focus on the total number of users, but if most of those users don't use the app more than a few times, then there's no way to grow the business and later monetize it. Others focus on downloads, but this too fails to measure activity that leads to growth and monetization. It has to be someone actually using it on a regular basis. So in short, it's important to bring metrics to your business and take that to investors to help demonstrate the growth story that you have growing in the business. If you have some questions, go ahead and drop them into the chat box, and we'll be glad to answer those as well. So give you a moment there to put something in and see more about what you might be doing with metrics for your business coming up. So one of the questions is for recurring revenue, what if you don't know the marketing or sales costs? Well, what you need to do is go and estimate what would be the proxy for a marketing or sales spend. Sometimes the CEO is out spending their own time, not paying a salesperson for it to generate the sales. And what I always tell them to do is, well, if you had to hire somebody to do what you were doing, what's the going rate for that? If you took how many hours you spent closing that sale, what would that salesperson have to spend, and what would be the cost to your business for it? So even if you're out doing things on a manual and ad hoc basis yourself, you can still capture hours and time spent in the process of closing the sales and then back it into a standard sales cost number itself. So another question is, when do I need to start calculating my metrics? My answer is from the day you start the business. The day you start the business, you need to start tracking what's going on in the business itself. Show how many times, for example, first thing you should do is go talk to your customers to figure out what their feedback is. Metric that. How many times did a customer say, I need X? How many times did a customer say, I'll pay X dollars? How many times did a customer, and start tracking that kind of information so you get in the habit of capturing metrics into your business. And as you move forward and start to create products and generate sales, you'll shift the metric to the appropriate level going forward. But always get in the habit of metricing your business to know how you did. It can be very hard to manage a business or know what things are happening unless you actually put them to number and capture them over a period of time. And metrics are even better when they're in a series. If I just give you one number, my CAC LTV is 1 to 3, that's a snapshot in time, but I know perhaps maybe my lifetime value is increasing. And then if I put that on a graph and show it every month going from 1.3 to 1.3.2 to 3.4 to 3.5 to 3.6, this is a great story to tell investors, is that you're improving your process. So capture metrics and capture them consistently over time is what you need to do there. We are entering use case validation. It will generate a small amount of revenue from the initial customers. What metric would you recommend? Use case validation is when you go out and you do one application or talk to one customer. And so what you're trying to do there is show that this is a successful prospect. Well, so what I always tell people to do when you go, we have very minimal amount of customer interactions, is measure this in unit economics. So for your use case, measure how much time it took you to find this customer. Measure how much time it took you to qualify them. Measure the time it took you to actually close them on maybe a pilot project, and look at it in two forms, time and dollars. And so what you're trying to do is create a sales funnel, and you're using maybe one or two use cases to go through. And if you start to notice that we're repeating the same numbers, it takes 1 week to find a customer, it takes 2 weeks to close a customer, it takes 3 weeks to get to a trial, a paid trial, start capturing those metrics. And that goes to what I call the repeatable, predictable funnel. And what you do as you do the first 1, 2, 3, and 5 customers is capture that information, time and dollars, to go through the process of going from nothing to a paid customer, could be a discounted paid customer, and then start to demonstrate that this is a standard process that can repeat. When you talk to investors, they're not expecting big dollars. What they are expecting is that you have systems in place for acquiring customers, closing, and then providing your service. And if you can demonstrate that's working, then they're interested because you have a working system. If the numbers are repeating, then it shows that you have a consistent process that can carry forward. And if they put money into it, it's going to be happening at just a much bigger scale. So the key is capture the information about how that use case went down with respect to acquiring that customer, closing that customer, and making that customer happy by keeping them in the program, and put dollar and time on the scale for that. Any other questions that you guys have at this point? When I talk to investors, what I often find is that they just don't get a sense of how things are working in a business. It all tends to be futures and forecasts. And what I always tell startups is, when you go out, you need to have some historical reality. What the investor has to do is connect what you're doing today with where you're proposing to be tomorrow. So the forecast is fine to put it out there, but your job is to connect them from where you are today to where you're going. And if you don't tell them where you are today, you'll find that it will be difficult to close. The investor doesn't know how to go from what they're not quite sure of is here to what's going on out there. So in my case here, if I want to go to I want to start I've got 5 customers, and each customer took one week to sign up and 2 weeks to close for dollars, and they stayed in the program for 6 months. And I only had 5 customers, but next year I'm going to do that, but with 100 customers. People can see that it was proven in this first case, and they can draw a line to show how we get to 100, hiring more people, et cetera. But it's that a model that is proven that can be scaled up. So that's important to do. So are there any other questions? Please let us know. Otherwise, I want to talk to you about 10 Capital. We provide funding as a service. We help startups and investors connect for funding. So if you're a startup, we help you get introductions to investors, and we run investor relation campaigns to help you find more investors for your business. If you're an investor, we help you figure out how to build your investment thesis, and how to find deals, and how to invest in startups with success. We have many tools for both startups and investors in our funding as a service program. So with that, I want to thank you guys for joining us today. You can check out our podcast at theinvestorconnect.org. InvestorConnect.org is our podcast site, has the same branding as you see here, and it has over 400 interviews with investors and companies on how to start and grow a business and what investors invest in. So if you're looking for investors, that's a great place to go as well. If you have any questions about raising funding, drop us a message and let us know what we can do. We'll get on the phone and talk with you about your fundraise to see what we can do to help you with it. Appreciate you guys taking time to join us today. and hope to see you back for our next Ask Me Anything. We do these every month, and you can check out our schedule on the 10capital.group's events page. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us, and we'll let you get back to it.